Right, thank you for staying with us. It is 81 days to the 2023 election, and campaigns for the presidential poll scheduled for February the 25th are intensifying. Presidential candidates are traveling around the country with their manifestos in hand to woo the electorates and secure their support. For the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, many say his policy document is a masterpiece that has helped to fundamentally refocus discussions on real issues about the future of Nigeria. The 85-page document titled Renewed Hope 2023 Action Plan for a Better Nigeria highlights Bola Tinubu's plan for economic prosperity, national security, as well as infrastructural and social development. Well, joining us from our Abuja studio is a Deputy Spokesman, APC Presidential Campaign Council, Ajuri. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Good morning to you, my dear sister. Good morning to my brother, and good morning to all of our viewers.
Yes, this week there is going to be the unveiling of the Labour Party manifesto, and then we've had the PDP manifesto. I don't know if you've had time to look at the other manifestos. How would you distinguish the manifesto of your party and that of your presidential candidate, Ajuri Bola Ahmed Tinubu, from all of the others?
Thank you very much. I think primarily the first distinction, and I have been able to look at the manifestos of the other parties that are contesting power, particularly amongst the top 4 or 5. I think the main takeaway, really, if you look at what we've seen from the manifesto of the Labour Party, we're hoping that this is the final draft. The last time a draft came out, they were quick to disown it. So we're hoping that this is the draft that they said they're going to present to Nigerians. But in this draft that they are purported to have released, we're seeing clearly a lack of understanding of some of the achievements of the current administration. They're pledging to complete projects that we have already completed, that we actually constructed ourselves, or at least did a mass majority of the completion. Of the project. Where you have, for example, the dams. They're talking about completing Dadinkowa Dam, for example. They're referring to Kashimbila Dam, for example. I mean, these are projects that Nigerians know that we invested heavily into. Some of them we met incomplete, and we met them at fairly small percentages, and we've taken them to completion with massive infrastructure investments taken under President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. So you have that. On the other hand, then if you look at the power sector, for example, they're pledging to essentially continue with President Muhammadu Buhari's administration's plans in the power sector, particularly related to his own presidential power initiative that he signed or arranged and then signed with the former German Chancellor Angela Merkel, for example. So across the board, it's one of those things where when they go out and they talk about the problems of the country, some of these candidates like to glorify the problems in the country. It's interesting to us that when we read their policy manifesto, what we're seeing is essentially a continuation of the solutions that we are providing, that we even started implementation on, such as the PPI that I mentioned. If you look at the PDP manifesto, it's a little bit different in the sense that instead of not being so much aware of what we have done and what we have not done, and instead of simply saying they're going to continue what President Muhammadu Buhari had already put in place, they've essentially hired an external consultant to put together all sorts of nebulous targets and kind of these general statements around what they're going to do without any specific roadmap as to how we're going to get there. So I think that's really the distinction. Now, when the All Progressives Congress refers to its own manifesto, we are the current administration in office. Many of the solutions that other people are now trying to piggyback on, we put in place. So, for example, we've put in place the social investment programs, now impacting 13 million Nigerians, something that did not exist before now. That is something that is going to be expanded and ramped up under the administration of His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Then, of course, if you look at the infrastructure program, when we say that we're going to continue, for example, with the Siemens Presidential Power Initiative, Nigerians can believe us because they saw us put it in place in the first place. So they know that we have credibility when we say that we're going to see it to conclusion. We're not those who oversaw $16 billion expenditure in the power sector with zero result and are now pledging to take us back to those sweet days of prosperity. That is not what Nigerians are looking for. So when we talk about what we have done, we can tell you, if it's infrastructure, we can tell you that we did the second Niger Bridge, almost $400 million. We can tell you that we did the Lagos-Shagamu-Ibadan Expressway. We can tell you we did the Abuja-Kaduna-Zaria-Kano Expressway. We can tell you about Kano-Maiduguri, Kano-Katsina, and so many other projects, Loko-Oweto Bridge, and so many others. So we have a record that we're running on. We're not making pie in the sky promises on the basis of nothing when you look at our record. Our record is clear of performance, and we are now saying that we're going to double down on that, accelerate the needed reforms, and then also make value additive modifications to those areas where we can adjust for better efficiency and better performance on what we have already started.
Right. Now, let's begin to take a closer look at the document itself. And one critical issue that I would like for you to perhaps speak on is on the matter of security. Just this morning on the papers, we saw that about 46 persons, even though they're saying that figure is quite debatable, were abducted in Katsina State. And a closer look at the manifesto says that by defeating poverty, we go far in defeating all forms of extremist ideology and also addressing matters of insecurity. How so?
Well, there's no question that there's absolutely a nexus between economic growth and development and the rate of economic growth and obviously national stability and security. And this is why we have prioritized really in an unprecedented way. First of all, under President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. I mentioned the social investment programs. I did not mention the over 1 trillion naira that has been provided to over 3 million farmers, or the over 1 trillion naira that has been provided to hundreds of thousands of micro and small and medium scale enterprises in this country. These are unprecedented interventions. Now, what we are saying is we want to take that to the next level. How do we do that? First of all, we are going to employ millions of young Nigerians living in the rural communities in particular, because we have a plan for the rural youth and also the urban youth. For the rural youth, we're really focused on agriculture as a major opportunity. Obviously, we've really dealt with ensuring that the current population of farmers in the country are actively empowered with cheap credit, as well as seedlings and all sorts of supplements when it comes to the materials they need to till their ground and all of that. But the next level of it is we understand that we have about only 35% of all arable land in this country presently under cultivation, meaning 2/3 of our arable land in this country that can be producing major staple items for wealth and job creation across the country are basically lying fallow. So His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is pledging to Nigerians that by the end of his first term in 2027, we would have raised that percentage from 35% under cultivation to 65% under cultivation through a national mass land clearing exercise where we will employ millions of our young people, similar to what we had kickstarted with Empower and many of the other interventions we've made. We're actually now going to empower these rural youths to be the ones clearing the land, ensuring that we don't just have one breadbasket in one part of the country, where if there are a certain security situation in the breadbasket part of the country, for example, maybe in the Middle Belt or in the Northwest, for example, then essentially it has a major impact on national aggregate food production. We want to ensure that the entire nation becomes a breadbasket and a food basket, even as we deal with insecurity, so that we have those jobs created across the country and we have that production occurring across the country. So that's going to be a major part of it. Now, on the urban youth question, this is something that we're really excited about. Under His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu's plan, and it's very, very clear and very detailed in terms of how he's going to implement on it, as against a kind of general, vague statement of intent. He's telling Nigerians that he's going to establish a clear consumer credit system for our country, and he has a clear plan on how he's going to do it. First of all, through the Central Bank of Nigeria, we are going to ensure that banks in the country are incentivized and compelled through enhanced monetary policy ratios and enhanced interbank settlement offers, that they are now incentivized to create a window of trillions of naira where they're going to essentially set that aside for lending to the real sector, lending to the low income and middle income earning Nigerian that has a proven, job history, a proven income history and all of that. Essentially what's going to happen is that's going to have an impact on multiple sectors. And I'm going to start with housing. What we're going to do, and we're going to do this essentially by the book, is to ensure that every Nigerian that wants access to social housing will be able to actually access that. How are we going to do that? First of all, we're working with the 10th National Assembly when it comes into office, into power, when it's inaugurated in June next year, to reform the Land Use Act, to ensure that we standardize all of the procedures and rules around land access in the country, and in really standardizing the time frame between which you would have applied for the land in the states and the state ministries of land and housing, and when you're actually able to get the C of O. By doing so, we can actually ensure that whether you're in Lagos, Bauchi, River State, Kano, wherever you are in the country, that the process is standardized, the time frames are the same to encourage development. Now, the housing developer that will now access that land, that wants to devote their developments to social housing, government, the federal government of Nigeria under His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is going to provide tax credits and rebates and grants to social housing developers so that we can incentivize the investment in social housing as against mansions and high rises and condominiums and all of that. That's going to deal with the availability question. Now, the final leg is offtake, because if you have millions of young urban Nigerians constructing homes across the country under our social housing policy, with the way that we're going to be providing lending and all of that, it's not going to work unless you have Nigerians on low income and middle income who are able to afford those homes. Which is why the Central Bank of Nigeria is going to be ensuring that our banks in the country have a massive pool of cheap credit that they can provide for mortgages to Nigerians on low income or on middle income, so that they can afford to offtake these houses. Now, how it's going to work effectively, and it's not just housing, by the way, this is going to affect everything from automobile production, obviously a major incentive to manufacturing and creating jobs in the automobile production industry is ensuring that Nigerians can actually afford to buy cars that are coming off the production line. This is where the credit system comes in. Once you can prove to the bank that I've been a civil servant for 10 years, or whatever job you're in, I've been in this job for 10 years or 15 years or whatever, I can show you my history, my account history, to show that these are the inflows of my account, so that there's predictability. What we can now do is ensure that the bank, based on that predictability, based on your credibility as an individual and your payment history or your inflow history, we can now say we're going to provide you a mortgage on a home that costs us only 2 million naira to build a home. And this is another part of this, very quickly, is under President Muhammadu Buhari's administration, when we were battling COVID, we put in place the Economic Sustainability Program plan. Under that program, we found out that under the social housing component of that program, where we were constructing social houses under that program, that you can construct a house from start to finish, 1 bedroom for 2 million naira, 3 bedroom for 3.75 million naira, and 4 bedroom fully finished for 4.25 million naira. So when we tell Nigerians that we can provide a 20,000 naira a month for maybe 10 years or whatever the case may be, so that they have a lease-to-own arrangement that's affordable, that does not motivate corrupt practice because they're looking for cash that they don't legitimately have. This is the future of the Nigerian economy. It's going to affect automobile production and offtake. It's going to affect housing construction and offtake. It's going to even affect things in manufacturing, such as refrigerators and freezers, because now people are not going to be having to search for money that they don't have in order to access some of these critical items for their households. So this is really going to be revolutionary, not just in terms of job creation, but in terms of really enhancing the standard of living, not just of the elite in the country, but of every single Nigerian who's working in the market, who's self-employed, who's a civil servant, who is hustling every day on low income, they can now afford to access some of the better things in life in a way that they never have before through the establishment of this consumer credit system. And this is what we're looking forward to His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu putting in place for all Nigerians.
Ajuri, let me also ask about, while we're on this subject of Asiwaju Tinubu's renewed Hope Manifesto. So at the moment, he's in London to push forward his manifesto, this time to a different kind of audience. And foreign policy is among the big topics that he will be addressing on the general angle. Now, what's the significance of this particular speaking engagement?
Yes, thank you very much. You know, His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is someone who has always been a global player when it comes to dealing with issues that affect the Nigerian state. It's not a secret to most Nigerians that the role he played that was quite central in the fight for civilian rule and democracy to be enthroned in our dear country, and the sacrifices he made even on a personal level to make that happen. So he obviously does have an extensive network of allies and friends around the world who are very, very interested. The Nigerian nation's future cooperation with the rest of the world. I think one of the elements that Nigerians can be sure of is that His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is going to ensure that in every relationship we have, whether it's bilateral or multilateral, that we are engaged in, that it is always going to be a relationship that is backing and fully boosting the interest of the Nigerian state, whether it's economically, whether it's diplomatically, whether it's politically, whether it's in terms of security arrangements. Obviously, on this front, the speech that will be given later today, I think, is going to be a fairly clear statement of intent in relation to his global view on not just foreign policy, but security and how the nation's economy can be most effectively developed through the encouragement of foreign direct investment and through ensuring that we leverage on some of the government-to-government partnerships which we saw really take off under President Muhammadu Buhari, like we have with the Germans in the power sector, like we have with the United States in the defense sector, really doubling down on that and making sure that we make effective use of our partnerships, not just to be signing on to documents that we don't really understand, which had been the case since 1999, signing on to agreements which we have no real interest in upholding. We are now saying, look, we're not looking for popularity, cheap popularity. We want to ensure that whatever we're signing on to, whatever we're agreeing to with the international community is in the actual tangible interest of the future of the Nigerian economy and the Nigerian state, Nigerian security, and all factors related to the well-being of our country.
Well, Ajuri, you talked about the credit system. Let's go back to an important issue, which is oil and gas. It's talked about the pipe through the Trans-Sahara and so on. Some people have said, well, this may be fraught with problems, especially given that that geography is full of bandits who might disrupt the capacity to deliver on that project.
Yes. Again, this is a very critical sector, and this is one, obviously, where His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu probably has even the wealthiest experience, if it's sector by sector, given his private sector career in the oil and gas industry, rising to the top of an international oil and gas company such as Mobil. And even before then, I think one of the lost parts of his resume is the role he played in building the financial architecture of what is today one of the most valuable companies in the world, which is Saudi Aramco, the state-owned oil company of Saudi Arabia. He was pivotal in building the financial architecture that company still operates till today. Look, I think this is a sector where there's so much opportunity. We have to start from really allowing Nigerians to appreciate that it was under the government of the All Progressives Congress, under the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari, that in the oil and gas sector, we had seen really unprecedented investments, at least within the Fourth Republic, in terms of the scope of investment. First of all, you would recall that we inherited a situation where we had about $5.8 billion worth of cash call arrears, debts owed to our joint venture partners, which even under an economic situation where you had 2 economic recessions and a once-in-a-century global pandemic, because of the integrity of the president, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, he gradually, month after month, no matter how difficult it was, he paid down those cash call arrears to now less than $2 billion, and we're getting ready to pay it off. That's number one. So that really was something that hampered further investment. Secondly, you would recall that we had the Deep Offshore Production Sharing Contract Act amendment of 2019, which essentially was something that came 20 years late, that made Nigeria lose over $40 billion worth of deep offshore oil profits as a result of the non-amendment of the 1993 Deep Offshore Production Sharing Contract Act. Now we are now making that money because we modified the terms on which revenues are accruable to the Nigerian state on deep offshore projects. That was a major one. And then, of course, the Petroleum Industry Act, which had been something, a political football for 20 years because of the lack of integrity of previous public officials and the collusion they had with international oil companies over time. It could not get done. This president got it done. Now, obviously, we have seen exploration move from outside of the Niger Delta recently with an over $3 billion investment in the Komani oil mining field in Bauchi, which is obviously going to be revolutionary. This is a function, and most Nigerians may not be aware, that is a direct function, really, of one of the major components of the Petroleum Industry Act that's now in operation, that says that 30% of all of the profits going to the NNPC will now be dedicated to the reinvestment on various landmark projects to ensure that we expand the pie of exploration and production and not just rely on one part of the country or the other. So right now, we have exploration activities going on, not just in the north, but even in the southeast, in the Anambra Basin, in Bida Basin as well, in the Benue Trough. We have it going on across the country. The findings are going to be significant, not just in terms of oil, but in terms of gas. But look, the reason why I'm mentioning all of that is to say that when we talk about oil and gas under His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, what we're going to be seeing is really a conclusion of many of the major landmark projects that we have begun over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. When we talk about the 2.8 billion naira Ajeokuta to Kaduna to Kano gas pipeline, which for the first time in our history is going to take gas from the Niger Delta and eventually it's going to link up to the fields in the north that we're now seeing coming into production, which is now going to transport Nigerian gas through the pipeline to Western Europe, earning us billions of dollars in new gas revenues directly from the international export market. Then in addition to that, it is this administration that put in place the Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline, which is going to cross over 15 West African states under the Atlantic Ocean, linking up further into Western Europe as well. So that's going to be obviously a massive opportunity as well in terms of revenue generation. But look, ultimately, His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is now saying what we're going to do is we're going to expand production from the current. I believe we've been able to substantially recover from the crude theft. We're now producing at about 1.5 million barrels per day, up from about 1 million just 2 months ago. And we're looking at 1.7 million barrels per day by the end of this year, which will be more or less a full restoration of what has been. We're saying that by 2027, he's going to increase oil production in this country from the current, say, 1.7, 1.8 million barrels per day to up to 2.6 million barrels per day. And how he's going to do that is we are already attracting massive investments in the deep offshore. But what we're going to be doing is on these onshore projects that have really massive economic opportunity across our inshore oil fields that the international oil companies have left behind in favor of deep offshore, we're now providing those who have the technology, who have the capacity to be able to bring out that production. So even as the international oil companies are going deeper into the offshore, investing billions of dollars in Nigerian deep offshore projects that are still coming on stream now, we are now ensuring that the local players are able to take up what they left behind on the onshore. That's going to be a major opportunity in terms of increased production. Then this administration also put in place the $12 billion NLNG Train 7, As I speak to you, we're already in negotiations on NLNG Train 8, which His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is very, very passionate about. So whether it is gas production, whether it is gas transmission, or whether it is even gas processing with the new $200 million Oredo gas processing and gas handling facility in Edo State under the NNPC, this administration has shown that we are not just an oil country. We'll take advantage of oil while it's hot to diversify into gas, manufacturing, agriculture, and all of the other sectors. But we want to ensure that we also ensure that we're focusing on gas. This is the decade of gas, and we're not just saying it. We're not just writing it in a manifesto. Even some parties that we even have to beg them to bring out a manifesto before they bring it out. We are saying proactively that we brought out the manifesto. It is very clear what we're going to do, and it is not on the basis of pie in the sky promising. It's on the basis of what we have already done with the limited resources and the limited time available compared to those who had double the time and double the money and failed this country.
Well, you didn't answer the part of the question when I talked about banditry, that these pipelines may be vulnerable to attacks and pillage along the Sahara.
No, that was not intentional at all, my brother. I just wanted, I got into the broad scope of the sector, and the issue with the security component is a very important one, so I'm happy to answer you on that. So it's very important to appreciate that an oil pipeline is not a gas pipeline. They operate very, very differently, right? And the major aspect of anyone who's familiar with kind of how gas pipelines function, they are first of all put deep under the ground. That's number one. And number two, unlike oil pipeline, if you try and penetrate a gas pipeline, you cannot do it and leave that locality, leave that environment with your life intact. It's not possible. The explosion on immediate penetration will be tremendous. So first of all, you have to be able to penetrate underground, number one, which is going to be difficult on its own. Secondly, once you do that, you will now have to penetrate a line that you know as soon as you penetrate it, it is going to take out almost everything around it. So it is not in the economic interest or like an oil and gas pipeline. The oil pipeline, you can see it's in the economic interest of somebody who thinks they're tampering with the line. They take the oil and they find some small naira and kobo or dollar out of it. This is not how gas pipelines function. So that's not so much the threat we're dealing with that. But to your question, specifically on the issue of banditry, it really comes to the national security component of His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu's plan on national security, which is very detailed. First of all, he's very clear that we have to treat the issue of banditry as something that is a totally specialized focus of the Nigerian armed forces. What do we mean by that? He's going to establish, really from day one in office, a forest guard reserve. The idea behind this is we want to conduct a kind of reorientation of our armed forces in such a way that we move the mindset from reactionary to proactivity. And how we want to go about doing that is, and that process is already undertaken. If you look at some of the achievements recorded lately, particularly against bandits and rustlers within the Middle Belt and all of that. But there's really more that needs to be done, and we know that. So His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is saying, once we establish this forest guard reserve, what we'll be doing is in real time, we'll be filling all of these holes and vacuums that exist within our various forests in the country. We understand that drone technology is limited by the tree cover that is found in across our forests. Right? So what we want to do is we want to ensure that instead of leaving these spaces in our forests open for these bandit gangs and other kidnapping operations and cartels to be able to coalesce, gather themselves, plan attacks, and all of that, we don't even leave that space open. So there's real-time surveillance of these forests within a dedicated forest guard reserve that are armed with the unique transportation platforms required in that forest environment, and also with the specific communication devices required for that particular environment. And obviously, weaponry is going to be something that will be specialized and tailored to the unique needs of this forest guard reserve. We know that if we can close down some of those areas where they galvanize and plan, then we can actually root them out before they can even get to the point of even attacking our people. So that's going to be a major one, or our infrastructure. Then, the last point I want to make on this, which is very critical, is what President Muhammadu Buhari had done is to really lay the infrastructure down when it comes to roads, bridges, airports. We have 5 new international airports that were not on ground before Mr. President took office. We have 3 new high-speed rail lines in addition to all the things, the dams, the power stations, the roads and the bridges, and even the new deep sea port, the first one since the late 1970s in Lekki that is ready to go. All of this has been put on ground. Now, that's level 1. Level 2 is now ensuring that we put in place a very detailed and articulated infrastructure protection plan. So what we have in the manifesto of His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is what we call the infrastructure protection plan, known as the CIP. And how it's going to work is all of our critical infrastructure, that particularly that relates to national security. When you're talking about telecoms, you're talking about broadband cabling, you're talking about port infrastructure, you're talking about power stations, the grid, you're talking about very critical infrastructure. What we're going to be doing is a value additive modification to the current security arrangement in the country, is to dedicate a cross-agency task force that is going to deal with real-time surveillance of all of the critical infrastructure of this country, so that we don't get to a point where we're waiting for people to attack a rail line or attack a power station before we now hurry up and try and find a response. We will now in real time dedicate those resources proactively on those critical points where they need to be present, and also leverage on technology, drones and other sensor-based technology to ensure that we're able to effectively guard our infrastructure ahead of any attacks instead of after any attacks. So these are some of the major interventions that His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is going to bring to bear to add value to what President Muhammadu Buhari has already put on ground.
All right, Ajuri, let's look at education now. We have the situation with lecturers who went on strike and are still challenging the government with regards to their salaries. That's on the one hand. Then we have a number of students out of school, millions of them out of school. I am wondering what we are also looking at with regards to changing the narrative with regards to our education system, because it is often said that funding is also another aspect that is critical if we want to see that needed change in the academics in education in Nigeria. What are the plans? How does your principal intend to change the narrative? Because we see a majority of our persons leaving the country to go study outside of the country. We see them in the UK, in the US, here and there. What are the plans to perhaps stop people from moving outside the country to perhaps get education and stay back in Nigeria to study?
To add to that, there is also a new statistic that Nigerians spend...
This is really a very important question.
Yeah, that Nigerians spend 1.9 billion.
Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a man that comes with a ton of credibility on these developmental issues, because he has a very clear record as the executive governor of Lagos State from 1999 to 2007, in terms of the interventions he made in the
Ajuri, can you hear me?
Not just in terms of infrastructure recovery and new construction, really availing
Ajuri, can you hear me?
Of the facilities they require for their children to be put into schools. We've seen, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I was asking just to add to that question, that there was a recent report that Nigerians spend 1.9 billion pounds annually just to pay school fees and related issues with education in the UK alone.
Yes, thank you very much, Editor. So there are a number of things, and I'm going to add that to my response. So we recognize that when he talks about education development, there is a record that shows his credibility on the issue. So Nigerians know that, okay, this is somebody who has been there, he has done it. So when he says he's going to do it, we can actually believe him. Unlike those who claim to have done something in education when they had the opportunity, but the records are abysmal in the sector and their various areas of authority at the time. Look, let's be very clear about this. There are a few things that need to be done. First, let's recognize that when we talk about the out-of-school children phenomenon, which some presidential candidates love to glorify on the international airwaves, we recognize that this is really going to be something that is going to be tackled at the local and state levels. And the reason why we say that is because most Nigerians are aware that the constitutional obligation around primary education is domiciled with the state governments, meaning that they are the ones that are going to deal with the issues of primary education, infrastructure, accessibility, even policy development in the various states and all of that. These are some of the issues. So what is very important is when we talk about out of school, how do we now incentivize our state governments to ensure that they are adequately investing in human capital development, particularly as it relates to education? We obviously had put in place, and when I say we, I'm talking of successive governments in this country. UBEC has been in place now for well over a decade, right? This is something that would now ensure that there's a counterpart funding mechanism. But you know that there are many state governments that have not even tapped into the counterpart funding because there's a lack of prioritization on the part of some state governments, not appreciating the critical role of education in the future of the Nigerian economy and even in terms of the current national security situation. So obviously we need to take another step in the direction of actively incentivizing them and ensuring that they take advantage of the incentives we put in place. That's something that His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is more than ready to do. But more than that, my dear sister, we have invested under President Muhammadu Buhari has already invested 2.5 trillion naira in federal universities and polytechnics through the Tech Fund in terms of infrastructure provision across federal tertiary institutions across the country. Now, there's still much more work to do. Fundamentally, we have to deal with a few critical issues. One, we have to now deal with the fact that we have, with our current education structure in the country, when you look at accessing universities and the like, when we have a situation where students are paying 100,000 naira or 75,000 naira per term and things of that nature, and we're still having a kind of a consequence of perpetual strike actions because of underfunding of universities. We have a situation of poor teacher quality. We have a situation where our students cannot even live in livable, inhabitable hostels, leaky roofs, and horrible, deplorable conditions and all of that. We now have to ask the question, is there not need for a fundamental restructuring of how our education system is funded in the country? You mentioned the $1.9 billion and pounds that are being sent abroad in terms of school fees for Nigerian students and all of that. People are ready. That is actually further evidence and proof that Nigerians are ready to pay for quality education if they are provided with quality education and quality services. If the institutions have first-class infrastructure, if the institutions have first-class teachers, where there are actual codes of morality and ethics, where you don't have sex for grades and all of the other scandals that we have taking place in the current environment education-wise, then you know that Nigerians are ready to pay for effective and quality service. So what we are now saying is that the way to go is for us, looking forward into His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration, is how do we deal with reforming the pricing around access to our tertiary institutions. But as we do so, provide mechanisms for indigent families, these are poor, low-income families, to ensure that they can access student loans and other innovative new programs that we have never really had in this country at that level, and scholarships and grants and others, to be able to ensure that no student is left behind, just the way that he did in Lagos State, providing, paying the examination fees of tens of thousands of indigent families and all of that, ensuring access to these opportunities. On the federal level, we want to, first of all, expand, but ensure that Nigerian students, no matter your background or your economic level or your social level, whatever the case may be, you will have access to a quality institution based on a legitimate pricing framework that is commensurate with what we have in our regional neighboring countries like Ghana and Kenya and many others, where they actually make enough money from the pricing regime to effectively reinvest in their institutions' infrastructure, in their teacher training and quality, teacher, reimbursement and all of that, so that we don't just have anybody teaching our students, but we actually have people who are even willing to come from, in the 1960s, when we had people coming from India, coming from the US, coming from Europe to teach Nigerian students. Why? Because the universities could afford to pay those teachers.
Let me quickly ask, before we run out of time entirely,
yes, my sister.
Finally, in a few seconds or so, the issue you've spoken about Asiwaju Tinubu's agenda in the oil sector, and we're living in the reality once again of fuel scarcity across many parts of the country. He's also been quoted to say that fuel subsidy will be removed. Talk about that as a solution now to this perennial challenges we have with this matter.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind, I just want to round up on the last question very quickly by saying, before I answer your new question, by saying that a major component as well, two major things very quickly, is that His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is saying that for the first time, we're going to establish a special committee on education that is going to bring captains of industry, Alhaji Aliko Dangote and many others from banking, telecoms, construction, and the like, to the table to be a part of the committee that is going to reform and totally reconstruct the national curricula in this country, what we're teaching our students at all levels, to ensure that the skills they gain in the classroom are actually applicable and relevant to the needs of the 21st century global economy, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's agriculture, and the like. This is something that's going to be very essential to what His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is going to do in terms of preparing Nigerians for the future. And then secondly, providing a pathway outside of the traditional federal tertiary institutions, polytechnics, and universities, ensuring that they now have access to vocational and technical education centers of excellence across all states of the Federation, where they can learn practical trade skills in robotics, design thinking, advanced carpentry, and many, many others, so that Nigerians have a choice to go directly into the workforce if they don't feel like going through a four-year degree program. These are some of the major interventions we're going to be putting in place. Now, on the issue of, you mentioned on the issue of refining and the issue of subsidy, I think His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been very clear in terms of his plans to fully remove the subsidy. This is not a secret. It's even part of the mandates of the Petroleum Industry Act. It is going to happen. Certainly, all Nigerians at this point agree that paying billions of dollars every single year on cheap fuel is not the way to go. But we also have to do it responsibly and ensure that it's done in a way that Nigerians are comforted and supported during that challenging transition that is going to come. Now, in addition to that, you've asked the question about importation of these products. We've been very open with Nigerians that by the first quarter of next year, that by the time His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu takes office by the grace of God on May 29th next year, we would have had a situation where the Dangote refinery would have come on stream. Even our own administration's investments in the phase one reconstruction of the Port Harcourt refinery is going to be on stream, meaning that Port Harcourt refinery is going to be putting out over 60,000 the first phase of that refinery is going to be completed, putting out refined product. So across the country, you're going to have all of our modular refineries, in addition to the NNPC refinery, in addition to the Dangote refinery in operation, meaning that the availability of the product will be secured, and also meaning that we're not going to be in a situation where we're further importing this product. So that is something that we can say definitively, that we have put on ground the various mechanisms needed to stop that importation. The next level is ensuring that we incentivize further refinery development in the country. We have the BUA 200,000 barrels per day refinery coming up in Akwa Ibom State, and many, many others like that we're incentivizing the private sector to start, in addition to the NNPC funded refinery projects. So definitely there's going to be excess supply of locally refined petroleum products, not just for domestic consumption, but also for international export, which will be important in terms of earning Nigeria foreign exchange. So we're on course, and His Excellency will push that forward.
Right. So much to be said with regards to this manifesto, but we have run out of time. We must thank you, Deputy Spokesman, APC Presidential Campaign Council, Ajuri Ngelale, for your time on the program.